Oh my goodness, look at that. It's noon Eastern on a Thursday. I think we know what that means. It's another episode of Untangled. Okay, LinkedIn land people, or whenever you may be watching this amazing episode of Untangled, welcome. It's Jen Frazier. I'm your hostess with the mostess, CEO, founder of Firefly Partners. And here's another episode of Untangled Conversations on Digital and AI for Social Good. I've been doing this work at Firefly for over 18 years and been doing work in the social good sector on technology even longer than that. I had a decade at Planned Parenthood before I started Firefly. So, very familiar. And I love the ins and outs and the ups and downs and all the things that are happening. And right now, everyone's just talking about those two little letters, AI. We can't get away from them in the digital space. So we keep going in and going deeper. And I love to have guests on, helping all of us out here find our way, untangling the mess behind the mission to make all of the things work and keep doing the amazing work that y'all doing out there. This week, I am joined by the lovely and talented Rachel Kimber. We call founding, managing director, queen of all the things of Full Circle Impact Solutions. Rachel, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Jen. I'm excited to add to the base of knowledge you've been building and just sharing, I think, some of what we experienced at N10.
Yeah.
Full Circle Impact Solutions was there in full force, debating with some of the best and brightest of our sector. And it was just really fun. Folks have asked, what did it feel like to be at NTC 26? It felt like a family reunion.
It
Felt like
was.
we were all coming back together and just sharing the energy. It was great. And Jen, I'm glad to hear you concur.
It really was. I was kind of thinking about it, and I've been going to N10 and all its iterations back when it was the Roundup. Shout out for the old school OG Roundup, nonprofit tech Roundup back in 2000. Yes, I'm not old. In Denver, I think there were like 100 people in a room or something. It was like, woo, look, we're going to talk about cool stuff. And like, I've been going through all these kind of cycles again through it. And I felt like this was a great year. Also, I think it was just this space where people are so tired of what has been happening over the course of 25. And we, even in 25's NTC, we were sort of like, oh my God, I think everyone was still like walking around like, what the hell is going on? And now we're like, yes, what the hell is going on? But also like, there was a renewed energy of like, all right, it's time to like get serious. We're under real threat. Things are really bad. And we need to pull together as a community and like get our collective bleepity bleep together.
Yes.
Do some more
And
fighting.
there are so many brilliant, especially in the change management space. I'm thinking right now as you're describing the moment we're moving through. Beth Cantor, 2 years ago, we did a wonderful conversation with Northwestern University and trying to describe the moment we were moving into. It wasn't as full as it is now.
Yeah.
She called it the poly crisis. And that's just become my shorthand. So we don't have to re-traumatize ourselves every time we talk about it. I'm like, that thing called the poly crisis. Yeah,
we know what we mean, right? Yes. It's like but I felt like this year's NTC was just like a really good energy and a really kind of like renewed vigor that was happening that I haven't felt there for a few years. I mean, it's always great. There's always great sessions, but I think there was something extra special this year that felt like, I don't know, just, the energy was up.
And Jen, I'm such a verbal processor. Like right now I'm putting together that maybe it was because of the poly crisis and the AI moment. Like we were all on the same page instead of like in our silos, like marketing and communications is over here and fundraising and development is over here. And so I think it was just a neat coming together around some really thorny topics.
It's very thorny.
I got sick of talking about AI.
I know, right?
I got sick of it.
Actually I had my session and there were people like, oh, I went to another session and I was like, thank God this one's not about AI. I was like, right. But
it was intense.
Because I even have a whole other talk about like AI as a unifier, because it actually, which my major argument we'll get into here is about what happens inside an organization as you're struggling or bumbling your way through this like crazy new space we're in. I mean, this is one of those times I think in whatever 15, 20 years or whatever, people look back and go, oh my God, they were like in the middle of this gigantic, I mean, it's an overused word, but truly transformational moment where you don't even understand what's happening in the middle of this of an exponential curve of
Yes.
adoption of something that's going to be so altering to like
Yeah.
everything we know. And like it's hard when you're literally in the middle of it, like you think, gosh, what happened with people around when, like the cars were first invented and how radically different, like people when you could fly places, like, oh well, obviously we've already lived through the internet, and personal computers and the phone and this is another moment.
Yeah.
But it's an opportunity inside your organizations to, like you said, like you're not like get out of your silos. We've really gotten really entrenched a lot in the years inside nonprofits of like, well, we're over here doing this and this I think is a great moment and it's like a catalyst of like, all right, we
Yes.
gotta figure this out together.
Yeah. And I think back to the curve, like there is no good analogy to this moment. Like it's happening so fast. So I think back to when like computers landed on, desktops and
Right.
folks had to figure it out. It was still a kind of slow roll. Whereas now across organizations, like folks who are techies are like in there figuring it out,
Oh,
like
it's
doing
going.
good things. Non-techies, this is why I love She Leads AI, right? If
Yeah.
you're a marketing, communication, lawyer, and you add AI to that body of
Like,
excellence, right? And so
it is.
what's happening is folks who are ready to run are running. But that means, especially in our sector, not everyone's running safely. Not everyone's running in the lanes, right? Like it's a whole lot. And so that's where this enterprise governance piece is like we're just going to hear more and more about it. You're going to get sick of AI. You're going to get sick of hearing about governance. But that's the guardrails that we have to build so that we don't have what eventually becomes like brand reputation risk, right? Like, why
Yeah.
is your lawyer over here doing this and you say your disclosure statement says this?
Yeah,
Have a
like,
big disconnect.
get it.
And it
Get in
takes a
alignment.
collaborative enterprise movement, right, to deal with the churn, right? You did that, like whatever that was. Like how
You're in the blender.
and
like,
you have to contain it, right? Like there needs to be
You
a
do.
lid on the blender or it's a giant mess all over the
It
kitchen.
literally, let's keep the kitchen clean, people. Okay, we're not doing the blender without the lid on it. So that's a good one. So the title of your, what we want to talk about is From Stuck to Strategic, this, team alignment, which is like, whoop, okay. I was like, yes, this is like my thing. I already have a whole, talk about it too, where you're like, yes, this is the moment where leadership, critical moment to step in, not sort of sit on the sidelines. And one of our key takeaways saying AI readiness starts with leadership alignment, not tool selection. Like, we definitely don't want to put the cart before the horse, but like unpack that a little bit of what that statement means for folks listening.
Yeah, I think the biggest piece right now is the ownership ambiguity, right? Who do I check in with about this set of data? Am I allowed to use it? Can I do something with it? And so I think that ownership ambiguity is the first piece that needs to get clarified. Who's using it? How are they using it? Who signs off on that data usage or that particular use case? The other piece is having shared language around what are we, right? We say AI, like there's just
That's
much.
like it's such a funny term to me at this point. Like, really? Like that's like
Yeah.
saying, blue. You're like,
Right.
oh, okay.
Right.
Like,
Like, what does that actually mean?
tell
And
me a
so
little
that's where,
more.
like,
Yeah.
the baseline training, right? Like, we understand people are using it. There's data governance that could help with the ownership ambiguity. But then when we look at, are we all speaking about this the same way, right? Are we
Yeah.
bringing everybody along on this journey? And
Right.
often that looks like some kind of a baseline discussion, right? Like, how are we talking about this? How are we navigating this? And then if you don't take those steps, you end up with a lot of decision friction.
Yes.
Are we buying this tool? Is it AI enabled? Does this whole process follow our usual procurement policy? Or did we just
skip
mess
past
that
a whole bunch of stuff right now. We're like, this is totally different. That other stuff doesn't apply. I was like, hold on.
hold on, slow down? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's the real call, is to like slow down and really think about this. And even if it's just kind of like that North Star of brand reputation, how do we want to be showing up in the sector? How do we want our stakeholders to feel
Oh.
about our use of AI?
Oh no.
And if we can't talk about that clearly, transparently, it gets real messy real fast.
Yeah. You had a little glitch there. I don't know if you know, but you're back and you're good. So that's okay. The internet is the internet. We're very happy that it actually functions on a daily basis.
Right? Jen, that's like kind of a fun segue to like the flaws in the system, right? 'Cause,
Right.
Another really cool presentation at NTC was the Technology Association of Grant Makers.
Oh, I didn't miss that one. Tell me.
Right? They were talking about how do we reinvent the application?
Yeah.
And I'm not going to be able to get it perfect right now, but Gene Westrick had this really lovely quote that if we don't define the problem, we don't get to define the solution, right? And so we'll find that quote exactly. I think
Okay, we
Valerie
will.
Ehrlich,
We'll bring it into the post. But
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
but
I
so
didn't.
well said. If we're
Yeah,
not defining what the problem is, right? And the problem here is, what's the risk? Is there transparency? Are we attending to bias? Do we have acceptable usage, right? If we're not stating that these are the
right,
concerns we have, then we don't get to start defining what those solutions look like.
right. And obviously, we all know it's not like a big secret. This is all built by a few elite men, mostly white men. All that kind of stuff. So obviously, we know like what are you building? You're building stuff that works for you. Obviously, there's a lot of companies right now that are trying to help correct for a lot of those things. So that's part of this conversation too, is to just say, let's all, what we talk about is a base level of AI literacy. We need to bring folks in or a whole organization up around like, what are we talking about? What is actually happening? How do these tools actually work? And some of the use cases, but let's talk about what's going on. How was it built? Who was it built by? How do we account for that? Where do we feel comfortable in, drawing some lines or at least making some accommodations for, okay, we understand what this is, some of the problems in it, how do we want to deal with that organizationally? And what is the leadership role in something that is absolutely not a traditional, like, historical, like, platform rollout, because it is the sort of that accessibility level right now makes this a completely different playing field, where before you'd have a very controlled IT team, goes through, evaluates a product, yada, yada, and then decides to adopt it and then rolls it out very controlled manner across a team or something.
Yeah. And I think that's the biggest problem is people see this as a tech conversation. And I'm like, no,
Yeah.
this is like a change management conversation.
Yeah.
And the way we built communities of practice around other areas of work, for example, DEI, right? It touches the entire organization and everyone needs to have shared language, a shared strategy, and something in AI worth pointing to that requires conversation and constant mindfulness is bias. There is no explicit way to mitigate for bias.
Yeah.
We, individual users, have to keep checking and modifying and making sure that we're being as inclusive and accessible as possible.
Yeah.
And so one example I like to bring is I do a whole lot of presentation development. Gamma is my go-to tool for that. And so I'll develop an outline and, work through the content and the flow for adult learners, right? Like really try to make sure it's accessible. And then I'll take that outline and drop it into Gamma and say, develop a professional looking presentation.
Sure.
And the first couple times I did that, it was, board tables with white men, or two hands in the infographic shaking, and it was two white hands with, business suit.
Yeah. Suits. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. And I'm like, really? And so that's how insidious the bias can be when you say executive or professional, like all of a sudden it's a white man and you're like,
100%.
what?
Yeah. Like, excuse me? That is a really, I know it's like an easy, but still very pertinent example of sort of like, this is why, when obviously this all back to like the master's tools and all that, but like, you have to be like, okay, great. I'm not saying we're going to then say I'm out, like you have to just say, great. And it's a yes. And to me, it's a knowledge is key and understanding how it was built. It is obviously being trained off of the internet. And let's talk about what's in the internet. A lot of garbage, but also like, who are the content producers by and large still? And there is a lot of not so pleasant things out there. Certainly there's lots of ways you can help train and screen, some of those things out, but there is some inherent biases that we obviously need to be aware of and to work on different ways to combat, as you think, I want to have more inclusive representation, language, obviously the imagery, all of that needs to be trained into the model. And that's, I think, the thing, I was just on a call earlier with a client about this. It's like, it's all trainable. I think just the idea of like taking something off the shelf, which again, this is a completely different thing about using a tool or a piece of software, whatever you want to call this, like it's malleable in a way that old, like more traditional SaaS software and things are like, this is your product, it's built, it's your thing, and this is how it works. And you can give me like product requests or whatever. And that's a whole process. But like, again, totally different playing field, very different model which requires a different kind of conversation inside your organization about how to most effectively use it. But I like,
Right.
you've got the alignment. I'm sure if you had a methodology that you have, you want it, we probably don't have time to go through the whole methodology, but helping to get leadership folks aligned. And so right now I know you're working on a cohort with some COO level people. Do you want to touch on that? Like what's happening there and what's different about the conversations you're having there than maybe full organization wide or
Yeah, for sure. And just to put a pretty little bow on the bias conversation, because I like to, make sure we're bringing everybody along. Why does the bias live in these tools? Because as you said, the large publicly available large language models all ate the internet, right? So just remember, anytime you're using any large language model, they were built on data sets that include Reddit, that include Wikipedia, that include all of the Substack articles from the last however many decades, right? Like people spewing their thoughts. That's what this tool is built on. And so an alternative option is to look at things that are built by us for us, right? With a more specific lens on what are our needs and how do we more explicitly mitigate for bias, because that's something we care very much about. We look to tools like Change Agent, right?
Yeah.
Really homegrown, built by folks who are part of our sector who understand what our needs are.
100%.
And then that brings me to the governance piece, because you can pick your tools, but if you haven't thought through, where does that data live? Who has access to it? How long do those transcriptions sit before they're deleted? Those are all the governance questions. And that's where somebody at all of these organizations is getting stuck answering them. And I'm like, let me help. I've only been doing compliance and risk mitigation for the last 20 years. I happen to have a background in AI. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm it, duck, duck, goose, right? So what we're going to be working on is first alignment. Why are we using this tool at all? How does it power our mission? How does it relate to our strategic pillars and values and pieces that we're trying to drive forward in the world? Is this the right tool? Right? Otherwise we get into that hammer and nail, right? Is not going to be the right tool every time. It might be a solution for a particular case, and that's where you want to find the alignment and really dig in and start learning. I also like to say efficiency is the floor, right? Efficiency, it can do your calendar, it can do your email, blah, blah, blah. What we're looking at in our sector is driving impact.
Yeah.
How do we find expansive and effective and equitable use cases to make sure that we're bringing everyone along and not just in the for-profit sector doubling down on ROI, right? Efficiency is not the floor for them. Efficiency is the goal. Like, how do we save our minutes so we have more money for our stakeholders? That's not our model. So the first one is alignment. Is this the right tool for whatever we're working on? The next is then finding out, how do we steward this across the organization? How do we come together and determine decision-making, disclosure, posture, actually going from policy to practice, right? A lot of times you'll write the policy, and what came to mind for me was that Mad Men moment that we lived through a number of decades ago, Jen, where like there were sexual harassment policies on file.
Were they ever even looked at? No, they were
in a folder, right? Like who was looking at them or living them?
No.
And so I hope for the same with AI is that we don't just have a piece of paper in a folder, that we figure out how to practice it and how to do this. And then the last piece is enablement, right? Like, let's send you on your way. You've answered the questions, you've done some practice. Now let's build a 90-day roadmap and let's get it going.
Let's get it going. I mean, the getting it out of people's heads. It's like you're kind of dealing with almost those like two extremes, obviously, inside an organization, which we talked about, is the like, I'm stuck in, I guess, analysis paralysis kind of thing. Like, I want to really go through this ad nauseum, think about all the, what about this, or what about this, or what about that. And then you also are dealing with people who are like way out in the deep end, swimming, maybe potentially, I think, hopefully, we've said this enough times that people aren't, doing dangerously, like uploading sensitive data into to a free chat version, but God knows, like there's still lots of people who are doing lots of random things, and we cringe at that. So you're dealing with like, no, you can't stay here, leadership in particular, with like a lot of like, let's just do a lot of more navel gazing and like philosophically blah, 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 while we have people in the organization potentially that are putting us at risk. To your point, our brand is at stake. but also people's privacy potentially is at stake. There's lots of things that if you're not locking it down and giving people very clear guardrails and having those conversations right now, literally, you're risking potential like dangerous behavior that's happening out there
Absolutely.
by folks. So yeah.
And next month, I'll be chatting with the folks at the American Bar Association around that, right? If a board cannot respond to how are we using AI, are they fulfilling their duties as board members?
They are not, which is actually, I'm on the board of a small nonprofit here too. And we're like, I said, I will raise my hand and be like, I'm doing this. I will help us get a policy in place. Same thing, whatever. Let's pick a tool. Let's buy it for the organization. And I'm going to help get this whole team moving forward as part of my like other duties as a board member. Cause you're kind of like, can't as a board member also sit here and be like, we'll get to that, or we are too busy for that, or I don't have time, or whatever, or gosh, we're just really not sure, or I have too many objections. And so, the policy is just no. When, like people are kind of like, great, the policy says that, but I know I've used it personally. It's so efficient at blah, blah, blah. I'm just going to do this on the side or whatever. And so it's almost like, when you're a parent and you have such a strict, hard no, hey, guess what? Your teenager's going to figure out like ways to kind of move around that. So,
and we've seen that in tech forever, Jen, right? Like people find the workarounds.
I do.
I think what's different about this moment is that it really is about keeping aligned and being able to understand what are the inherent risks. And so if we're not aligned and we're not working the same way across an enterprise, we've already introduced a lot of risk. And then if individual users are not aware of what risk they're taking on, right, that rolls up to the enterprise.
Exactly.
So you started kind of going towards like on the beach in the deep water
yes,
kind of
yes,
thing.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm like, it would be really cool to figure out how do we bring everybody to a point of understanding, but not everyone needs to go swimming in that deep water. But those that are in the deep water, how do we bring them together so they can have these conversations?
Yes.
And I think that's also the point of the cohort, is that it's not just philanthropy and it's not just nonprofits dealing with these problems. We're in the same sector and we may have really different approaches to solutioning. And like, if we don't start talking together about how we're going to develop norms around this tool, norms will just happen. And so this is that like really brief window where we get to say, this is how we expect our partners, our colleagues, our stakeholders to be engaging and talking about our use of this tool. Eventually it'll shift again, right? We'll be like, I don't care if you used a blue pen or a black pen.
Right.
It doesn't
it's
really
all
matter.
fine.
I don't care if it was postmarked by midnight, right? Like these are things that fade, but
it used to be, there's these things do move and change and morph. And obviously we know we're in a very fluid time. But even within the fluidity, I think it is important to have at least some stakes that could potentially move. But you're like, for right now, though, I'm at least going to put some stakes out there and say, in these ways, like these tools, like stuff that's already built in. I think that the other thing about what we were talking about, like AI, is sort of this big amorphous thing. But you can say like generative AI tools, name it, pick one, have a paid subscription for your team. And I would say for listeners, like depending on where you are inside an organization, obviously if you sit in a leadership role and you feel unprepared to be like making these kind of informed decisions, reach out. Let's help. Either of us can like go, great. Let's help get you some information, tools, training yourself so you feel more comfortable and confident. I know there's nothing worse than trying to be like, you have a lot of anxiety about making a decision on something that you don't feel really well versed in yourself first, at least a little bit. So it's up to you, leaders in the organization. It's time, it's well past time. You get the training, get the knowledge, get some understanding so you can start helping to guide your team. If you're inside an organization somewhere, various seats, and you're not seeing your leadership take these stances, I would encourage that to bring it up, ask for it. Be like, hey, I'm not seeing us doing this inside the organization. I understand right now what's happening. And I think for us as an organization, I want to push on leadership to get this conversation going. So wherever you sit, there's a responsibility level. You can't also as a team member just sit back and be like, well, whatever, when leadership figures it out, blah, blah, blah. Everybody has a space to sort of say, hey,
Yeah.
there's a role for everyone to play here. And that doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to just go use it on my own and figure it, and then leadership can catch up later. Like, don't do that either. Like, just make sure you're playing the part of you're part of the collective there. You're part of your team. Like, let's help move this team forward together. And if I'm not able to take that leadership seat from where I'm sitting, I want to help push the leaders on the team. And obviously, I'm a huge believer of you can be a leader in whatever seat you sit in.
Yes.
So you don't have to wait for traditional leadership. Also, you
Nope.
can offer it up and say, "Listen, I'm already kind of an early adopter. I'm the curious person out there figuring this out." For a leadership team that hasn't already started to make inroads on this, they will probably be like, "Thank God." Like someone
Right.
is the curious person. Somebody wants to help be our internal champion on this, and they will
Yep.
welcome you raising your hand and saying, "Hey, I'd be willing to help move this conversation forward inside the organization." So don't sit
Yeah.
back and
And I
wait.
think to be that curious person is just recognizing that there's a friction, right?
Yeah,
And that's something I preached around the reporting process in philanthropy, right?
right.
We're asking nonprofits to do this crazy bananas, field filling, and we're not even really looking at it.
Yeah,
And so as a less senior staff member, I was like, there's friction here. It doesn't
yeah,
align with our values. And I just kept pointing to it as something that we need to talk about. And eventually, it got some traction and folks were
right,
willing to explore it. And so I encourage you all to, yeah, own your positional power and
right.
find collaboration.
That's
Jen, I
it.
just want to finish on, you started
Yeah,
alluding to that car analogy too.
yeah,
And I think that describes, because we can understand, or if we've ever traveled to a place where the road rules are not enforced or written in the same way, right? Like,
right.
well, we just run stop signs or we drive up on the sidewalk sometimes. And oh, yeah, stoplights, those are a suggestion.
Yeah,
Here, right? The norms that we have here mean that I trust that the cars are going to stop at that stop sign.
right.
And crosswalks are protected space. And those are
Yeah,
the rules and the norms that we every day trust and enforce and build together
right.
because we care about our humanity, right? We
Right.
care about being safe and protected.
And this is the same type of thing. And I think you're right. Like that now's the moment to come in to this space and help start defining what those norms are. Otherwise, they will get decided for you. And I think that's like for our sector, that's huge.
Yes, and love the skeptics. If you're like, this is the worst tool ever and I don't ever want to touch it, join the AI committee, right? Like be
Yeah,
part of that conversation. Because if
please.
you have a really strong point of view, you probably have some really critical insight to add to the conversation. And you're
Great.
probably concerned about risk, bias, the climate, critical thinking.
Yeah,
These are all things that we need to talk about and need to be attending to. So if you have
yeah.
a point of view that doesn't fit nicely with everyone else's, let's go AI. Don't be scared to show up at those meetings because that's a really
Stand up and
valuable
say, hey,
perspective.
we want all those voices at the table. To your point, is sort of I actually encourage if groups are being formed inside organizations, I encourage getting a kind of each of the flavors on a committee. So you're not
Yes.
just you can't just have it's not going to be an effective committee for an organization if everyone is like super gung ho and like it's like oh off to the races and blah blah blah. You need to have the variety and diversity of voices and
Yeah.
viewpoints.
And Jen, quick nod to the discomfort, right? It's
Yeah,
we're not very good at disagreeing
just
professionally, right?
generally.
Like
Yeah.
it's not easy to do that. And then sitting on the debate stage, like I felt uncomfortable
Oh yeah,
arguing with my colleagues, but I'm like, sometimes we need to do that. And
you
we need
do.
to know that it's a safe space, that it's okay to disagree, and we will find a way through.
Yeah.
But sometimes we need to get a little hot and bothered to get there.
Uncomfortable conversations are uncomfortable for a reason. And I think this is a good space for having those and encouraging it. So I think we've given everybody a lot to think about, a lot of ways to sort of, we bubble around it, but each conversation I have with somebody brings up slightly different flavors of things for people to think about. So I appreciate your insights, Rachel. There's just a lot, obviously, here for folks inside the organization, all levels to noodle on and to be thinking about. But I would just, the major takeaway for me is like, please don't sit on the sidelines, be having these conversations, get this conversation moving. It takes a little while to get adoption actually really going inside an organization. So it is 100%, you're hearing the bell ringing. It is time to get in the game. If you're not in it, and if you're in it, you can also provide a space with colleagues at other organizations and things like that. There's so much peer learning and opportunity as well for folks. So if you're like, great, we've already figured this out, so many great free resources out there on policies and things that other organizations are doing. Do your own research, but also then if you feel maybe like, oh gosh, I could really use just a buddy or a sounding board or whatever. People like Rachel, me, whatever. Like there's lots of folks too who are already doing this and helping be that guide. So don't be afraid to sort of reach out. Rachel, where can people find you?
I think LinkedIn's probably the easiest. And I say
Okay.
just DM me, right? Send a message. And if it sounds like there's some synergy, we get a call on the calendar and have a chat. So I'm
Have a
not
chat.
easy to get a hold of, but if you reach out, it's highly more likely that we'll connect.
I agree. Back to my favorite national album, I'm easy to find. There you have it. Like it is, I am easy to find. LinkedIn is a thing. So Rachel, Kimber, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate all of your insights. Next week, I will be joined by another longtime AI super genius, Sal Pietro from Dataro, and he's going to be talking about sort of the AI that no one talks about. It's predictive AI. Like we all spend all of our time talking about generative AI, like it's the thing and everyone's talking about it. But he's like, what is predictive AI and why should you care? Which I'm like, yes, and you should. And there was a session at the Cool Scary AI all about predictive AI. And you're like, yes, this is actually one of the most useful types of AIs that I think that obviously now is getting more baked in to tools, but certainly something that people need to be aware of, pay attention to, and be using as much or more, dare I say, than like the generative AI. It's so useful, especially in
With
sort of
absolute caution, though, right?
oh,
So
100%.
in my early teaching days, I would do generative and predictive, and we would
Yeah.
talk about the difference. And then predictive, it kind of like fell
It kinda-
off because it's higher risk, right? We're
It is.
predicting what will happen with this community
Behavior.
based on the faulty data of the internet. And
So you
so,
kind of go, and they've
right,
got
just
obviously all these models and things, and it's like about like predicting donor behavior and stuff like that, which I think again, people are
in an enclosed
curious
space,
about.
then it's
Right.
safer to do the predictive. But if you're doing
Right.
predictive based on the Reddit files of the internet, like please be careful. And if you're not familiar with predictive, again, reach out, ask some good
Yeah.
questions. It is super, super powerful.
Super
It sounds like
powerful.
you're going to have a great talk.
Yeah,
next
we'll have a
week.
conversation about it
Unpack
next week. So if you're curious about what is the difference between predictive and generative, definitely tune in next week. And then different use cases and definitely a lot of the how to use it in a safe way. But Sal will join me next week. We'll talk about that and what they're doing. But for now, that's it. That's a wrap on this week's Untangled. Again, thanks so much, Rachel. Everybody else, have an amazing rest of your Thursday.
Bye.